Um, yes, I started because I didn't know whether to say good morning or good evening. Good evening, viewers. Uh, Welcome to Issues at Hand, WBS TV. By the time you watch this, it will be a show produced earlier, but one that we thought certainly you need to do. That's why we did it at an earlier time, so you won't have opportunity to do a call-in into the show, but we'll try as much as possible to capture as much feel from the public as possible. Peter Kivazo, with the opportunity to host the Commissioner General of Uganda Revenue Authority, Madam Doris Akol. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Peter, and good evening, viewers.
Do we do the congratulations? You've been into URA through the chain. Does it feel different sitting in the CG's chair?
Of course, it's different because it's a bigger responsibility, bigger challenges, but also bigger experience. So congratulations are in order.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And before I go into the greet, your expectations, quickly, you've come into an office, I'll say this, in terms of public relations, for whatever reasons, URA pulled off a masterstroke. Somewhere along the line, URA was known for chasing people along the borders with guns, and it was associated with those dirty sins. Those edges have been smoothened along the way. You've disappeared from the eye of the public as the ruthless collector of tax. But we still cry about the taxes that you're collecting. Let me just hear your expectations. What is it that you come to the office expecting, setting out to do?
Thank you, Peter. First of all, the history of URA is that at the time when we're really using the hard force of law, the circumstances of the day required it. Well, granted, we took it a little bit overboard, but URA needed to assert itself at the time because it was just being introduced, bringing in about mindset changes, getting people to behave differently. So there was need for a bit of force. Times have changed. People got used to the idea that you have to pay taxes, and therefore the approach had to change. And indeed, in order not to alienate ourselves more from the public, we needed to change our approach, and hence the brand changes and the changes in approach. However, the expectations still remain. The expectations are that URA has a mandate, and our mandate is to collect revenue. It's not an easy job. It remains a very difficult job, but we have to do it. And that is why these days, even though we still have the same mandate, we are using a softer approach, an approach of being available, being responsive, first of all, understanding what our clients need from us, and then providing those kinds of solutions. And we think that by and by, with that kind of approach, more and more people will be coming on board.
Around there is my next level of dealing with tax education, getting people on board. I deal with a lot of people. You have this fellow that has sold his 100 cows off his farm.
Yes.
Puts his money in the bank.
Correct.
You do not have a tax, or we are not aware of a tax on my livestock sales.
Right.
I put my money in a bank, and the next day I move to Kampala to buy a piece of land, to buy XYZ, and before you ask for your next title, they say, where did you get this money from? Can we see your tax returns? Or else can we receive this? And I'm saying, but I wasn't told at the beginning that I was supposed, or I was obliged to pay a tax. Do you have a gap in your tax education, especially for people away from the big corporations?
Yes and no. Yes, from the perspective that not very many people know that when you earn income, any income, we don't have taxes on livestock and maize and whatever. It's tax on income, however you acquire it. So that gap exists, and that is why you find people selling loads and loads of pineapples and thinking that their income is exempt. So that gap does exist. And when I say no, in the sense that we've tried as much as possible to ensure that if you are in a certain bracket of economic activity, if you are in a certain bracket of economic activity, certainly the engagements you have in your economic transactions, by some chance you will have landed on information from URA that requires you to be compliant. It's not very likely, it does exist, but it's not very likely that people who are engaged in economic activity will not have come across URA at any one time.
Look at me if I farm pineapples.
Yes.
I have 5-6 acres of pineapple.
Right.
I have a truck from Kenya, I have a truck from Sudan that comes for my pineapples at the garden.
Yes.
They pay me my money.
Yes.
The next point I stop is the bank.
Right.
Where do I meet URA?
You are supposed to comply voluntarily without necessarily URA having to come after you. URA should come after you only when you have not been able to comply. But I agree with you that a person like that has been one of the people that we have not been serving and hoping that they'll come forth. But now we recognize that they have specific needs that we need to address. They don't know that their income is taxable. Even when they know that their income is taxable, they don't know what to do. They have no clue how to get to URA to register for taxes and indeed to report their income. So that is the kind of targeted approach that we are now trying to look at across the board, the big ones, the medium ones, the totally small ones, and even those in between who have specific challenges.
Several things. You will have a typical businessman that knows how to sell and how to buy and make a profit.
Right.
They don't have their books kept right.
Right.
They possibly haven't learned what to do with the taxes if they are not importers. As URA, do you have a team that will reach out, help this Kiwazo? This is what we expect of you. This is how you keep your receipts. This is how you indicate your proceeds. To do a proactive reach out so that Kiwazo doesn't feel these guys always come to me with a gun. They need their money. They haven't helped me know what to do with my money.
We have offices in various places of the country, and we do tax clinics where we really try to give that kind of information. But that information will only be acquired if you attend the tax clinics. We are also on radios and especially the FM stations in the, call it peri-urban and rural areas where this information is given out. And it's quite, I'll call it quite vibrant education that we give out. But of course, if you don't listen in to the FM stations, you don't attend the tax clinics, you're not likely to catch that information. So what is there's a gap there in the information. What we would appeal to people is the consciousness that when you earn income, try and get access, if I can call it that, access to the nearest URA point, and we will be able to help you get on board. Indeed, with the reporting of income and how you record your income coming in and your expenses in order for you to be able to pay the right amount of tax.
There won't be an incidence on my proceeds in the past, because if I'm coming to you now and I listened in to a show, I watched you on TV and they said, oh, if you're selling livestock and this is income, you need to declare. And I say, okay, I need to do it now. Aren't you going to go into the past and say, okay, this is what you're declaring now. You have 2 truckfuls of goats going out. What did you earn a year ago and what was the tax supposed to be paid? Is there an amnesty on by when I declare?
I would not call it an amnesty as such, but we, depending on the profile of the client, we look at their ability, maybe were they earning the same kind of income before? Do they have some kind of record that shows they were earning that income before? But our interest is now to start going forward. Anything in the past, we can always have a conversation either on a payment plan or, you know, to see how we can get you on board. But we are interested in today going forward. This income that you have reported today, how do you pay your taxes on it? How do we regularize you in as far as your registration is concerned? And how do we ensure that you are equipped to continue complying? That is our specific interest.
I get to the tax policy and base. How do you balance the ability to collect as much revenue as your target set out, but also not choke growth at the same time?
The tax policy is designed in a way that maximizes the tax return, but also encourages growth in the economy. So you have policy instruments that will be targeting increased growth, and then there will be policy instruments that will be targeting taxation of sectors that have benefited from the growth. And so that is the kind of balance that we have. For example, in the past, we had a tax policy instrument where we recognized that Uganda was a hub, an education hub, and said, okay, let's encourage the education sector to grow, encourage people to come and, you know, go to school here, bring their children to school in Uganda. And the education sector grew massively. That worked for a time. This past financial year, we said, okay, the education sector has grown. Can it now start contributing to the kitty? And therefore, we removed the exemption on income and from the profits of educational institutions. So that's the kind of balance that you want. Right now we have exemptions on agro-processing because we are trying to encourage value addition in agricultural produce. And once that sector grows because of the exemptions, then indeed we might see instruments trying to tap into the income.
But you have exemptions on agro-processing and then you have a tax on inputs. Where is the balance?
It's okay, there are two different tax handles. Without going into the technicals, the exemption is on income.
Yes.
Income that you earn from agro-processing. The VAT that was proposed to be put on inputs is because we were trying to get the agricultural sector into the tax-paying part of GDP. We have a concept called tax to GDP. And part of the productivity of taxes is to measure how much tax do we collect from our GDP. Now, agriculture is the hugest part of our GDP, perhaps 80% or thereabouts, but it pays no tax. It pays no tax, and that is one of the reasons our GDP, tax to GDP ratio is low. So to put VAT on inputs was a mechanism trying to bring in the agricultural sector, indeed the informal sector, into the tax net, because a lot of the people engaged in agriculture are also informal sector players. However, the VAT on inputs was also meant to make more efficient, if I can call it that, because the way VAT works is when you import and you pay VAT, when you sell, you should get your VAT back. So it's supposed to make more efficient people who are engaged in the trade and, you know, commercial activity relating to the agricultural inputs, so that it washes out really the amount of money that you have sunk in as part of investing. You're able to get it back. So that was the intention, first of all, to rope in the agricultural sector into the tax net, but also to make it more efficient for those who are engaged in the trade of agriculture.
They'll feel, and I have hosted several lobby groups for the agricultural group, people engaged at the level of business, selling inputs, and people engaged in the real trade of agriculture. And they're saying, I don't have a problem here. I will collect and pass on the tax to the farmer that is buying the maize seeds, that is buying the bean seed. And effectively, Doris Akol, then it was Allen, has imposed a tax on my mother that is holding a djembe growing cassava.
Theoretically, yes. But in practice, you find the way the actual portion of the tax that would end up with your mother, Peter, would be so little that your mom would actually not feel the tax. But the people here, the money that is collected in the middle here, if it were actually coming into the treasury, it makes a big significance. We had some figures, we haven't carried them, but we did compute that indeed the price of a whole with the VAT would increase from, say, 6,500 or 7,000 by maybe about 500 shillings.
Have you done a survey?
Yes,
what has happened
we did.
to the market? What has been the response?
Right now, no, the tax didn't pass. It didn't pass, but
okay.
We had done that kind of simulation.
I need to get to a bit of the other things that I don't know, do you at URA come back to the leadership politically and say, wait a minute, we are collecting this tax. We need people to feel that their tax is returning value for money. Do you engage? Do you get to that level and ask finance and people at planning that we need to report back that we returned so much to the tax kitty, so much has been given back to you through your taxes? Or your job is to collect, hand over to Maria Chuanuka and Keith, and they do theirs?
Our job is to collect and hand over the money to the Ministry of Finance. However, we cannot disassociate ourselves completely from the accountability conversation. And URA, being one of the institutions in the accountability sector, is at the forefront of ensuring that the public know what the taxes have done. We don't engage directly that, Minister, can you say this? But we get the information, we know what the taxes are doing, and we are actually passing that information on to the public as part of our tax education. And if you've been following, you'll recognize that recently we have been going to places that are benefiting from tax money and making changes. For example, schools, we've visited factories that have taken advantage of tax incentives and have grown. We've also looked at other public service institutions or facilities that are benefiting from the tax money, and to show people that indeed the tax money is being deployed properly for benefit of the public.
Before I take a break, I'll ask a gut question. On a bad day, not as a Commissioner General at URA, would you feel that your tax money returns value?
For the most part,
on a grid of 0 to 10,
I would put it at 7. I would put it at 7.
That's a distinction.
Yes, I would put it at 7 because I have the benefit of having all the information. I am not like, and I'll say this tongue in cheek, I'm not like the vast majority of the public that only gets one side of the story. They only get one side of the CATOCs and the pension scam and the OPM scam. They don't get to see what else is happening. But I have the benefit of that information. And the other people that have the benefit of that information indeed would not be too far away from me.
What would you do to pull the 3 over?
To make it to 10?
Yes, to take it to 10.
Better accountability, better use of resources, of course, reduction in corruption. We can't run away from that. Corruption is a really bad, it's a reality. Corruption is a reality, and it does affect the use of public funds properly. So if we can't stem the hemorrhage that comes as a result of corruption, then we would be able to go up to, I don't think you can reach 10, but maybe 9. Not even the biggest economies are at 10.
Word deliberate? The hemorrhage? Because I'm thinking of what you're putting in at the top, gushing out at some point.
It's very disappointing, Peter, that money is allocated to a sector and you find that what it is supposed to do has actually not worked. And that money that should have done that has ended up somewhere else as a result of a corruption scheme. That is hemorrhage. That is hemorrhage. And hemorrhage happens as a result of a gap or a hole somewhere, and the money flows out. So if there is a hole somewhere in the processes or in how things are being done, indeed, we'll see money flowing out. That is why I use the word hemorrhage. Right,
thank you. Viewers, I'll take a break. When I return from the break, I still have a few other things that I need touched up. I know a question that has come from businessmen, traders at the border points. One of them is from car traders. I remember about a week or so ago, I posted and said I would host the Commissioner General of URA. I had a call from Mombasa. I had a call from someone in Dubai that say they have cars holed up in Mombasa for over 3 years or thereabouts. And they say we've cried to everyone. It's URA and finance that has held our money in Kenya. The Kenya government has said take your properties. URA in Kampala and Ministry of Finance have said no. We'll come to that. And then we'll come back to the ESC single customs point and what has become of it. Don't go away.
Okay.